Contractors, today we're going to be talking about lead generation in the home improvement industry. There's been a lot of people reaching out to me and they're saying, hey Josh, how do we get more leads? Well, if anybody knows anything about my background, face-to-face lead generation is where it's at, and it still can be a huge part of your marketing mix in 2025. So today we're going to talk about maximizing face-to-face lead generation so you can build a team of lead generators so you can put it on autopilot and you don't have to go to the aggregators every time you need more leads and you need more revenue. So if anybody knows anything about me, face-to-face marketing is where it's at. I've worked in face-to-face marketing teams of over 200 plus people. That's canvas, retail, events. And really getting that dialed in can be a boom to your business and can really separate you from your competition. It gets you lead funnels that can fully sustain themselves when you're not relying on aggregators and different things like that to power your business. So we're going to talk a little bit about maximizing face-to-face lead generation. Every touch point in your business does count, but only if we measure it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the best ways to measure performance in face-to-face lead generation, what those metrics mean to your team, and what you're going to be shooting for, because it's all about culture. It's a culture of accountability. It's a culture of metrics. Building teams that know when they've won, but also building teams that know how they can bridge the gap when they don't, okay? So we're going to talk about local remodeling growth. We're going to talk about how you as a local contractor can grow. Sometimes these strategies can bring you up to speed to those behemoth private equity owned companies in your area. You can actually generate your own leads and you can actually build yourself a good funnel so you don't have to compete with those huge companies on digital advertising. And today we're going to do a deep dive into the strategies, the systems, and the statistics that separate good companies from exceptional ones. Because nobody wants to be just good, we want to be exceptional. And so let's build a team. Let's not take the path of least resistance. Let's build a team to generate leads for you in the home improvement industry through Canvas, through retail, through events. Now, the power of ownership, your stats are your success. So you need to know what winning looks like. When I'm meeting with clients here recently, the reason why I'm making a video like this is the statistics are all over the place on what is acceptable in your program for lead generation. Well, it does kind of depend on the product mix that you have. If you have windows, you have baths, you have roofing, you have siding, you have this huge product mix, of course you're going to have a little bit higher expectations in terms of lead generation when you're talking to your promoters. Now, if you only have one product in your mix, like you're exclusively a bath company, you're exclusively a cabinet company, you know, it can be a little bit tougher to generate that volume. But again, you're going to need to know what benchmarks mean when you're talking about these statistics with your managers, with your promoters, with your door-to-door canvassers. All these people need to know what they need to do on a daily basis because it all flows uphill. It's all going to mean make or break for that ROI or that return on ad spend that you're getting, or ROAS that you're getting out of your team or that canvas or face-to-face team. Now, canvassers, for me, the biggest metric that you can track is sets per hour. This is the amount of actual set appointments you get per hour on the doors. Realistically, what you can do from that point forward is see how many sets you're getting, how many labor hours you're paying for, and how many bonuses you're paying out on that to get, in essence, what is a CPL by your sets per hour. You can work CPL backwards to sets per hour to make sure you're hitting your ROI that you want to hit with those sets per hour. So on the day-to-day basis, if that canvasser in particular is not hitting his sets per hour, you can manage in real time to ensure success of the program. So everything that we break down here as it pertains to Canvas, you know, quality scores, every conversation is an opportunity to refine your approach, but only if we keep that data. So I'm always using an application to track, software to track their whereabouts, their knocks per hour, their sets per hour, and their ability to set those appointments or their conversions on people who answer the door. So our event teams, it's going to be pretty similar, right? We're going to monitor leads per hour, their engagement quality with those homeowners, and follow-up conversions and different things like that. So those event teams, realistically, the most important metric is going to be sets per hour there as well. But you're also going to want to take a look at how many people you're promoters are actually stopping, how many conversations they're having. Now, we have a lot of software out there right now that can track your whereabouts and different things like that from a Canvas perspective. When you get into retail, when you get into events, it can be a little bit more challenging. There are some companies out there now that are building software where you can track conversations, you can listen in on conversations. You have different people like Xero and Rilla and those types of apps that can listen in on conversations, but they haven't been really applicable to the doors or anything like that. There are some AI companies that are coming out with software where you can actually follow those conversations and follow that activity. But realistically, what it boils down to is holding your retail and event staff to those quality metrics, to those volume metrics, because the old adage, if you're not producing metrics, if you're not producing appointments, then you're probably not pitching every homeowner that's coming past you. You're probably just not getting that volume in as it pertains to your interactions that you're having, okay? So what we all want to do is go ahead and look at that from a measurable pipeline perspective, because you only start building that pipeline if you pitch every single homeowner that walks by you, and then you start finely tuning your script to be able to convert those opportunities into actual set appointments. So first, you need to verify the volume of the pitches or the doors knocked. Second, you need to start verifying the quality of the conversations. If you know how many people they've contacted and how many people they're converting, that's when you can really dial in the ROI of that program. So what directors are going to be looking at is going to be aggregate team performance. So I like bringing that into an actionable dashboard for my director or my manager so they can take a look at their total team performance over the course of an entire day. Obviously, promoters, retail, event staff, and canvassers are going to be looking at their day-to-day performance as it pertains to the actual doors knocked and their ability to set appointments. But what that manager, that director has to do is look at the aggregate performance, and I like to see trend data. I like to see how many doors relative to canvasser, or I like to see how many sets relative to each event and retail promoter. You should have a benchmark level of performance in the aggregate, so you need to project how many leads you're going to be producing based on your head count, based on your event hours, and based on how much attendance you will have at these events and your retail stores. So you can work those numbers backwards. Each individual day you have a set or performance goal. Again, it's all about the metrics. It's all about keeping people accountable to those metrics so that they know exactly when they've won. So that accountability can actually identify coaching opportunities. What I do is, if we're hitting our goals from a team standpoint, there's not much, you're not getting very micro in those statistics. You're probably not breaking it down by promoter or by hour. But if you are not hitting your benchmarks, if you're not hitting your goals for that particular day or week, you're going to dive in and see if there's particular promoters that you need to work with, if you're not maximizing particular hours of the day, or if you're in fact in the wrong territories if you're canvassing. All of those things can add up. I'm going to Pareto though each individual issues that we might be having with a performance problem solution. So I'm going to see how short we are to target. I'm going to actually break down the problem and propose some problems that we might have. It might be a particular promoter or area, any one of the sum of those things, and then I'm going to propose a solution so I can work on that. If I'm going to work with individual promoters, or we're going to take a look at the demographic of the neighborhoods that we're knocking, or we're going to take a look at the retail stores and why that might have come up as, maybe there wasn't a lot of traffic that weekend, or in particular, taking a look at those metrics and seeing if we can find any growth or coaching opportunities. So these are the stat sheets that are built out per role, right? Dashboards that are built out for your leadership so that you know exactly what you need to do and how you need to do it. So everybody owns their stat sheet. And what we create is a culture where performance isn't just measured, it is celebrated, right? We're not talking about punishment. We're not talking about, always reprimanding promoters and these types of things. We're talking about growth and a culture where you need to measure things so that you can empower people to hit those metrics and maintain their performance. And then once we've done it, let's do a little bit of celebrating, and then we can scale our organization, replicate those results. It's not about micromanagement, it's about that empowerment. It's about clarity, because the worst thing that you can give to an event team, a retail team, or even a Canvas team is lack of clarity, okay? If you are not winning and you don't know how to get there, retention issues can ensue, people leave the team, but also you start getting into Canvas and events not being lucrative. I hear it all the time. I hear people, we've tried Canvas before, we just couldn't get it to work. Or we tried Canvas before and it just didn't produce, Josh. We're just not in the right territory for Canvas. I have not found, when a team is managed appropriately with metrics and accountability, I haven't found a team that hasn't been able to produce a positive ROI and be an awesome lead source for that company. So let's move on here, and we're going to talk about some field-tested benchmarks that drive results. Because the biggest thing that I see with a lot of the companies that I work with now is I jump in and they already have somebody owning Canvas events or retail. They have somebody owning those programs, but they have this really subdued version of the metrics that they got maybe 4 or 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And I'll bring up specific benchmarks in the industry that I've seen performed time and time again on successful teams over every area of the entire country. And that particular person might say to me, Josh, I know that was possible back then. It's not possible now. We just don't do that. Here we see about, 1 lead every 4 hours. That's what we're about to do. That's us maximizing our program. Now, subtly, I think it's a bunch of bullshit, honestly. And when you boil it down, it's really about culture and mentality. What I've found is if you onboard somebody, right, you sit them down, you say, Johnny Canvasser, we here produce 1 lead per hour on the doors. We produce 1 set every 2 hours while we're on the doors here, Johnny. Fair enough? Perfect. Here's how we do it. Here's actually an example, and you bring in your best promoter. Here's an example of somebody who does just that. So the key there is that you set the tone. You set those expectations right off the bat, and you get an army of closers. You get an army of people that are going to match your best promoters, because at the end of the day, it's really just a culture. It's really just a mentality. So we'll talk a little bit about what's an acceptable level of benchmark, right? Now, we'll talk a little bit about the most prevalent benchmarks that I use in the home improvement industry to manage Canvas teams, right? We're talking about sets per hour. We're talking about sets per hour here. And this one right here, top canvassers consistently achieve 0.25 to 1 quality sets per hour. That's 1 set for every 4 hours minimum. We're not talking about a goal here. I've known people that can go out into the field and produce 2 Canvas sets an hour. And if you're out in the field, I've seen people do double digits. Depends on what type of knocking you're doing. Again, if you have a really robust product mix. I've seen companies with 2 products, windows and baths, set over a lead an hour, right? Across the entire team. So there's a lot of people out there telling me that, Josh, it just isn't possible for us. We only do roofing and siding. Okay, well, then you really aren't maximizing your resources and your tools to really push those benchmarks, but you've already built that culture. You've built that mentality. You've built that mentality across your team. Sometimes it might be a little bit better if you just scrap and you start fresh. Because once you have that ideology into the atmosphere, it's really going to be hard to circumvent that. It's going to be really hard to pick those numbers up after these promoters and that team then think it's acceptable at the 0.25 an hour, right? 0.25 an hour, that's going to be your bare minimum in Canvas, okay? So if we're out in the field, what we're expecting from our team is a minimum of 1 to 2 sets per shift. There is no way you can be profitable if you don't get 1 to 2 sets on average across your entire team. That's including labor hours, it includes vans, it includes the people on your team that are on the back end, overhead costs. your ability to give those canvassers benefits if you actually have W-2 employees. All of it adds up, okay? Canvas can be a really lucrative form of marketing and can be a really awesome positive ROI for your team. We're talking sub 10%. Some of the best teams I've seen operate at about 6% marketing cost. And if it weren't for the canvas at some of the organizations I have, they'd be pushing 20 to 25% marketing cost. With their canvas teams, you know, being a boon and a lift to their team, they're producing anywhere from maybe 12% marketing cost, 10% marketing cost, and some of the best companies I encounter are sub 10% on a holistic marketing cost or return on investment. And that's when you get into the teams that are doing about 1 lead per hour, right? So what does that mean? I always break Canvas down into vans, Canvas vans. So you can fit about 5 to 6 people in one van. So if you send a van out into the field, you know, say you're on the doors for about 4 hours in prime time. So on average, every promoter in that van is going to produce 4 leads. So if you have 5 promoters, you got 20 leads, right, at 1 per hour. So that's how that works. It's pretty easy math. There are companies out there, and I meet with them all the time, that tell me that's not possible. I have done it, okay? So it depends on your product mix again, but again, if you have a really robust product mix, if you have 4 products, like exterior products spattered with some interior products, if you're doing bath, windows, siding, roofing, gutters, all of these things, you should be at that 1 per hour. You really should, okay? So the bath companies only that I've, you know, had the opportunity to work with, you know, 0.25 to 0.5. So if you're out for those 4 hours, you're gonna get a couple leads per promoter. That's gonna be a benchmark as well, right? But, you know, if you're on the doors for 6 hours, 8 hours, 3 leads per promoter, 4 leads per promoter. So that's when you're getting into those positive ROI situations and knocking when you got a single product. But you really have to break it down. If you have a really robust product mix, you have 4 products, and you're only hitting 0.25, you're gonna struggle with your ROI. You're gonna struggle with that return on investment. So top quality canvassers are gonna strive to be in between there, 0.5, 0.75 to 1, all right? But you need to create the culture for them to hit that, because some people are gonna say that's impossible. Those aren't good people for your team, you probably should move on. So, issue rate's gonna be the next benchmark. This pertains to all programs. So the issue rate pertains to all programs. There's gonna be different issue rates that are acceptable for different programs. Now, home show, right? I meet with a lot of people that are doing home shows, that are doing events, and they talk about issue rate. You know, it's pretty prevalent in this industry to talk about issue rate and how many appointments that we are issuing for each individual set. So the way that we calculate issue rate is how many set appointments, so say you have 20 set appointments, it's how many get issued to our sales rep. There's companies out there that track gross issue rate and net issue rate. Gross issue rate is going to be if it's issued to your sales reps, right? And net issue rate after the fact is gonna be if that customer calls to cancel, cancels at the door, if we have a customer no-show, those types of things come away from net issue rate. So gross issue rate is just it being sent an email to your sales reps or, you know, handed out on paper during a meeting. However you get that to your sales rep, that's gross issue. Net issue is gonna be that we physically got into the home most of the time, right? So, and then we're gonna break that further down into demo rate or demo conversion, okay? But a good issue rate for our home shows, leading teams produce a 65% issue rate. So that means if I set those 20 appointments that we talked about, we're gonna be issuing right around 13 appointments, 12 appointments, 13 appointments, right? That's how that breaks down. We're gonna be issuing about 6 or 7 out of 10 leads that we generate, or 10 appointments that we generate. So that's at home shows. There's some of the leading canvassers in this industry force a 65% issue rate. An acceptable issue rate for a canvasser a benchmark, so a bare minimum, is going to be about 1 in 3. So about 30 to 35% issue rate for an acceptable canvasser, right? This is going to be your studs. It's going to be the best people on your team. And the people that are going to be acceptable, kind of on the bottom tier, you're looking at 1 in 3 or between 30 and 35%. So this is sets into qualified, verified, confirmed, issued appointments. So that's what an issued lead is as well. So to get that thing into our sales reps' hands, it has to be verified, confirmed, and then issued to the sales reps. So look for that 65%. Now, if you have some people, I mean, well above average is going to be 50%, but again, that benchmark, you're looking for anywhere from 30 to 35% issue rate. So that's if they're out in the field, right? If they're setting their, let's say, 0.5 leads per hour. You hit the doors for about 8 hours a day. Each of your promoters is coming home with 4 qualified set appointments. That means that it then has to go through verification, confirmation, and then be issued to the sales reps. So that would mean that a good canvasser would bring you home 4 leads, and of those 4 leads, we're going to issue at least 2 of those if they're well above average. But if you're looking at it from a minimum standpoint, we're going to have them 1 to 2. Hopefully you're getting 2 issued out of that 4. You look at your demo rate, and this actually is going to tell you when your promoters are setting quality appointments or they're outlining expectations to our customers. Now, granted, this is kind of a crapshoot, but you're going to take a look at that 90%, right? So that's customers that are no-showing. That's customers that are going to, once you get in there, it's going to be an out-of-scope project, or they want different products, or they don't have enough time. Those are the types of things that don't demo. So 10% of those might fall into a bucket that we don't demo. So what you can tell from a canvas perspective, a show perspective, and a retail perspective is if we have a really high or low demo rate for some of our leads sourced from face-to-face marketing, it's probably going to tell you that they're not going over expectations, that they're setting tentative appointments, they're setting appointments as one-leggers or not enough time. All of these things are going to break into that. But it also can give you a good idea of how you're processing those leads, how you're qualifying those leads in your call center as well. But it can tell you about the quality of the appointments that your face-to-face marketing teams are setting. So again, we're going to go back to issue rate because there's one thing that I wanted to talk about as it pertains to issue rate. So it's how it breaks down per event or per source. So canvas leads, an issue rate or a lower issue rate is going to be acceptable. You're going to be at about 30%. Again, that benchmark persists across all of those channels, events, retail, canvas. 30% is kind of your benchmark. But you're going to see other events. I would have to say that in home shows, when you got completely correlative event going on where people are there to look at home improvement projects, a 50% is going to be a good rule of thumb when it comes to home shows. I like to look for a 40% when it comes to non-correlative events or like fairs, festivals, different things like that. 40% means you're doing pretty well. And then anything above 30% to 40% is pretty good for canvas. But again, 50%, it's, you're talking about the majority of your reps should be around 50%, and your best of the best should be around 60 plus, okay? So event leads per hour, we're gonna come on this side here. Event leads per hour, again, are going to be relative to it being correlative event or non-correlative event. So a correlative event is going to be a home show. It's events that you are at, that people are coming there to look at home improvement projects. Now, the best promoters that I run into out of home shows will do 2 leads per hour. 2 leads per hour, and when I say leads, it's kind of interchangeable with sets. I'm under the ilk that a lead is a set. I don't really take raw leads unless we're doing sweepstakes or we're doing kiosks. But this would mean 2 qualified sets per hour out of your home shows, down to a 0.5 for your non-correlative events. So the 0.5, so if you have an event that goes on for the entirety of the day, and we'll, for sake of just being consistent, we're going to talk a little bit about what the 50% means and what that 2 per hour means. First, you have an event that goes on for 12 hours of the day, and you have 2 promoters there. So 12 hours at 50%, you're going to be 6 leads per promoter. So you'd get 12 leads out of that particular event. Now, these are going to be like your fairs, festivals, concerts, different community events, different things like that. Now, the same would apply if you had a 12-hour event and it was only 1 promoter there. You'd be at 6, right? Easy math there. So at a home show, however, we're looking at maybe staffing 4 people at the home shows, possibly at a 20-foot booth. And then you're looking for 2 per hour. Say we're there for 6 hours on a Friday. You have 4 promoters there. It's going to be 24 leads. That goal is going to be 48 leads, right? Now, some of you will say, you know, my traffic at my home shows is this, or it's that, or we have never produced that amount of leads or appointments out of this particular home show. We can look at historical trends, we can look at traffic, but you know, there's a lot of different things going back and forth. Like, do we give enough resources to our teams to hit this 2 per hour, right? So what I do is engaging booth experiences. The reason why I underline that, and we're talking about engaging booth experiences, because I'm giving my promoters resources to stop more people than the other company. Now, it's kind of getting beaten to death, right? You got a candy bowl, you got to spin the wheel, you got other things like that to produce up to those 2 leads per hour. But I'm talking about doing things that are going to be engaging, like scratch-offs, some giveaways, like actual giveaways. Everybody's doing a free TV, right? Win a free TV, sign up. Like, that's not really moving people. What's moving people is going to be just correlative giveaways and just the demeanor of your actual team while you're there. And I put it into perspective. I actually ran an event program at a company, and we were at an Art on the Square event, okay? Art on the Square is one of the biggest trafficked events in our state here in Wisconsin. And we, in the beginning, we weren't even invited to come. We had to present something where we were going to actually commission a local artist to paint some paintings for people right at our booth. So the reason why I did that is I wanted to be correlative. I wanted to be engaging with the homeowners or the customers so that they'd come to our booth, not just because we were offering home improvement projects, but because they had a reason to, because we were engaging them. So that person came to our booth and I commissioned them for 3 paintings. One was of our old school downtown painting of Madison. The other was Camp Randall, the Badgers Stadium. We commissioned them to do a painting of that. And then we also had the Capitol. We commissioned them for a painting of the pretty iconic Capitol that is in Madison. So we did these things so that we could actually raffle those for people. And if you engaged with us and you set up an in-home estimate, it actually quadrupled your entries. So we were giving 4 entries to people who signed up for an appointment. We were giving 1 to those people who just passed by our booth and were interested in possibly winning the painting. We raffled 1 of those each day. And you wouldn't believe the amount of traffic we had at our booth. You wouldn't believe the amount of qualified appointments we set at that event. And all it took for me was being present there with something that is engaging and giving people a reason to talk to us other than the fact that we did windows or roofing or siding, right? Now, it's up to your promoters to take that nebulous opportunity. And when I say nebulous opportunity, what I mean there is they are engaging with you not because of home improvements, but the pros pro and the scripting that we implement here at Grosso University is going to make that person engaging and influencing them convert into a legitimate home improvement opportunity. So it's all about that mentality that we were talking about earlier, building a culture that will produce 48 appointments at that event as opposed to 12, okay? Now, I'm not saying every single event that you have or home show. I've been to home shows where you could play a football game down the aisles. Of course, I'm not talking about that. But we still can do things that will engage the traffic, that will make those things lucrative to our teams. So we're going to talk a little bit about campaigns right now that are crushing it out there, right? So again, we talked a little bit about those benchmarks, but it's all about culture. It's all about laying that foundation of expectations. But we'll talk a little bit about campaigns that are crushing it right now, okay? One of the things crushing it right now in canvassing is geo-fenced canvassing. What I like to do is align door knocking with coordinated digital ad pushes in the same zip codes. It gives our canvassers a resource because the homeowners are going to see us online, they're going to see us in display ads, they're going to see us, and they're going to have that brand recognition before our team gets out there, but it creates a powerful multi-touch engagement that drives recognition and trust. So you got to think to yourself as a consumer, when somebody comes up, knocks to your door, if you've never heard of that company before, if you've never even seen them, you don't know who they are, how likely are you to take that person seriously? Right? I used to knock for a company where routinely I'd walk up to their door, I'd knock on the door, they'd have their big bay window facing the front of the home, and I could look right through and I'd see our TV ads, right? I'd see our TV ads on, and that person would come on out, and you kind of see them do a double take, like what the heck, right? But it's really just giving that consumer those multiple touch points and building in an omni-channel presence so that you give your canvassers that top of mind recognition so they're not working from ground zero. They're actually at a place where we are recognized, we are trusted in the community, and they're just out there giving a friendly reminder that we can do the things that they need done. A roof, siding. You know, what's beautiful about that is we can also cross-reference intent. We can also cross-reference search traffic or search history for that particular consumer and know if they're in the funnel already. So all of these things can make you super, super effective in your canvassing efforts. Not only that, we can probably sprinkle a little bit of mail on that as well, and then you're really kind of pouring gasoline on the fire of your canvas efforts if you got a completely omni-channel campaign going on while you're knocking those doors. The next thing up is retail kiosks. So giving your retail representatives a tool, a resource. So what we can do is drive people to our retail kiosks and our sweepstakes. Sweepstakes are still relevant. Household makeovers, household giveaways. Those types of programs are still working to this day. The thing is, you have to build those things into your organic marketing channels. You have to build those things into your social media. You got to build the hype. You got to build online forms so you can actually build that into your digital advertising, and you're actually giving those away on a regular basis so you can promote the winners. Now you can see that as a generalized marketing expense, right? An advertising expense, because you got to take a look at what it takes to get somebody a free home makeover. It might be a $10,000 bathroom project. Well, at the end of the day, that cost is relative to opportunity cost, your labor cost, and the actual cost of the materials. You got your COGS, and then you have your opportunity cost. So what does that actually cost your marketing program? So say you're giving away one of those every 6 months or one of those every year as you just start off. It doesn't have to be a ton of these things when you're just starting off. Because what you want to do is promote that. Have a picture of the winners at the booth while they're filling out the survey. Have a picture of those winners on your kiosk while they're filling out that kiosk form. Anything can help you, but high traffic stores provide consistent foot traffic and built-in credibility. Now, obviously, we're talking about the Costco's, the Sam's Clubs, Walmarts, all of those things. You can have these things unmanned, and you have great signage and great advertising to try to procure leads, and it's still effective, guys. There's still dealerships. There's still car manufacturers. Go to your local mall right now. I was over there the other day, and there was a car parked in the middle of the mall, and it was roped off. And they had just old school paper and pencil boxes, sweepstakes, around this car. And you could see how many were in there. Now, I don't know how many of those were planted in there to create the illusion that people were signing up for it, but it looked like legitimate entries, right? You can kind of tell if you've been doing this as long as I have. And those things are still working. These are national corporations because they know that data is king. We have to have that data. We have to have leads to reach out to be top of mind, to feed our funnels. But at the end of the day, having a promoter there to work through that with them and influence that prospect has made retail kiosks a really good lead source for a lot of companies if you do it right. Okay, and that's with giveaways, that's with incentives, that's with promoters that are fully scripted to take advantage of literally every opportunity that walks past them. And again, it's about accountability. It's about the accountability to those metrics so you know that they're pitching every homeowner that walks by them, right? So the last thing is going to be interactive home shows. I've seen a lot of cool things being done, massive screens, walkthroughs of projects, full design build firms bringing walkthroughs where you can click through different rooms and take a look at the projects while you're at the home show. These things are pretty awesome, but what's really cool is we can leverage AI and headsets and different things like that as well to give somebody an experience that they haven't had before. It's about interrupters. I'm always talking about interrupters, and what I mean by that is retail, events, canvas, it's about interrupters. You're interrupting a specific pattern. And I don't mean like interrupting their dinner. I don't mean interrupting them rudely while they're at the store. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about interrupters of actual just common thinking. So they think right when you interact with them that you're gonna be the typical sales rep, that you're gonna be that typical person that they've encountered 100 times, maybe at a home show already. God forbid that you're at the end of that home show and they've already been pitched by 20 bath companies and that's all you have to offer. You know, they've been beaten up. You got to do something different. You got to interrupt that common pattern so that they stop and engage with you, okay? So a lot of people are actually doing before and after tours with VR headsets. They're doing some really, really cool things, live cost calculators. Folks, sometimes you have to lean into data. You have to lean into new trends. AI, we're becoming more and more educated as consumers as the AI and the digital era, comes to fruition. So what we can do is actually lean into that in our booths. Now, I'm not talking about sitting them down, giving them a full design consultation and closing the deal right at the booth, but you can give them, it used to be sacrilegious to give any inkling of pricing while you were out and about at these home shows, at the events, our promoters. We don't necessarily, but if we can control the narrative, if we can price condition, live cost calculators have actually helped build that transparency and trust with the homeowners at our home show booths. Now, we're talking about some pretty rudimentary stuff like material samples and just a memorable engagement experience. So these are going to be the things that are crushing for us right now. As we scroll here, talk a little bit about some outside the box things that I've done to be successful in face-to-face marketing and that you can do too. You just got to do it the right way. You got to have a system, you got to have processes, you got to have these things kind of mapped out before you just jumped in. Because if you do things half-assed, you're going to get half-assed results, right? So let's take a look at this outside-the-box strategies that create a real buzz when we're talking about face-to-face marketing. Now, community-first booths. I would say stop selling and start serving, okay? If you can do that, subliminally, that customer is going to gain trust. They're going to work with you over your competitors who haven't done the same thing. I'm talking about doing things like coffee carts, professional photo ops, kids' activity zones. Now, you want to position your brand as a neighborhood hub or a friendly neighborhood business. What's really crazy about today's industry and private equity scooping up all these companies is you're going to have the monopolization of digital efforts, okay? You're going to have the monopolization of those higher cost aggregator leads because they have more resources to reach out to them, more resources to run display ads, more resources to do literally everything as it pertains to digital advertising. What they don't have the resources to do, because it's very people heavy, is getting into every specific market and having that small town contractor feel, the one that we trust and that we go to over and over and over again. And that's what you need to leverage as a smaller company in this industry. So these are the types of things that are going to allow you to do that. So what we're talking about here is maybe having an event, a showroom event where you have food trucks, maybe having an event where you have a Kona ice truck in the neighborhood where you're inviting people to check out your jobs. Those types of things and customer appreciation events, all of these things can work for you. Again, showroom festivals. You transform your showroom into an event destination with food trucks, live music, family entertainment, and it just positions your brand as a generous host as opposed to some of these other companies that are more transactional, because you want to be that neighborhood company, you want to be that generous host so that when they boil it down to their choices, they trust you. It's all about trust here, folks. Now, customer home tours, right? We're talking about an open house, much like a real estate open house. You leverage this and you work with your customers for hosting before and after tours in recently completed homes. This works really well for design build firms of like basement finishing. I've actually been on a team where we ran up to 6 to 8 of these every single weekend, and we do millions of dollars in revenue a month by just showing off the previous projects. We had the breakdown of the project, we had the renderings of the actual project, we had before pictures of the empty basement, and then we walked them through the completed project and were able to close a majority, up to 90% of the people that actually stopped over there were setting an appointment. Now, these programs, when leveraged correctly, we were doing EDDMs, every door direct mailers, we were doing digital advertising around that home. We are also working with the customer themselves to get into their Facebook groups and really promote that event, to really promote traffic, to make that one-of-a-kind type of experience, an event. We had hors d'oeuvres, some wine, like this was an event. So again, bringing those Kona ice trucks out there, maybe a barbecue food truck, or just running these things as interactive events so the whole neighborhood can come over and check that out, and picking up jobs by the dozens by doing so. So the other thing that I'm talking about here, again, kind of outside the box, is block barbecues. It's casual, it's relational, it's incredibly effective, okay? Who doesn't like a good barbecue sandwich, right? These are not like really crazy outside the box ideas, but you just need to commit. You need to have a plan, and you need to have some frame of reference for that expectation of production when your promoters are there. Because like I said, you could run these here, you could invite people over for free food, they will come, right? But the fact of the matter is, we're only there for one thing. Like, don't let the cat out of the bag, don't tell the secret, but we're there to produce leads, we're there to produce revenue. So if we're not doing that, if you don't have the right people there, it's not gonna be a huge value add to your company. You're not gonna produce the leads that you want if you don't have people there that are skilled enough to flip that nebulous involvement in that event into actual set opportunities and leads. So, you know, what you're gonna wanna do is come up with an unconventional strategy you can test in your market. You know, I tell people, what do you think? What are some ideas that you have? When I work with clients, I say, which one of these would you like to use? You know, just do your first one, just jump into it. You'll never know until you know, right? You never know until you try. But you want to think beyond traditional events, because let's face it, if you're new to your market, if you're less seasoned in your market, like sometimes your home shows, you're going to have bad booths, you're going to be in the corner in the back. Or sometimes at these fairs and festivals, there's other companies that are buying out exclusivity. I'm hearing that from a lot of my clients right now. The big private equity owned company down the street, Josh, just bought up the entire event. We can't even go to our county fair anymore because they have exclusivity. They just blew it out of the water. They said, we're going to buy out the contracts of every other contractor in this entire event so we could be the only ones there. Oh, by the way, we'll also pay an extra additional to sponsor the event, and we're going to give you free advertising on these channels. You can't compete with stuff like that. So what you have to do sometimes is create your own funnel and create your own opportunities. So I have my clients pick one of these things and commit. They take a look at doing one of these things and just dive into it with my help, with a plan, so that we can maximize ROI and maximize attendance. But sometimes all it takes is just committing to it and jumping into the pool, right? So we talked about some of these events that can be effective for you, but what you'd also want to narrow down is what it is to be a good team member. Who are we looking for to promote at our events? Because again, you can be in the right spot at the right time, but if you don't have the right people, you're not going to produce those leads. Realistically, we have to spin an ROI out of this. Branding and advertising is great. You know, if you have your billboards going on and your signage at the Little League field, or you're in some print advertisements and different things like that, of course, this can be a lift to your branding, a lift to that trust and a lift to that neighborhood feel and that community involvement. But at the end of the day, leads equal revenue. And you know, when we're talking about lead generation, we're talking about face-to-face marketing. A lead is the lifeblood of your organization, and a lead is going to keep that program going. And a lead is what we're looking for at the end of the day. It's the ultimate goal. A lead, an appointment, an opportunity. So it's all about recruiting the right people, all right? So great marketers aren't born, right? I wasn't born as a great marketer myself. I sucked when I first started doing this. I was terrible at it. And you know, sadly enough, I had some thoughts when I was first out canvassing, thinking that I made a horrible decision, right? I had left a pretty lucrative job. I had left a job that was pretty run-of-the-mill. I was selling insurance, and I jumped into the door knocking and canvassing. And I had instantaneous regrets, and that was because of my production. But I wasn't born. So I dedicated myself to learning scripting, learning the different things that it took to be a really good marketer. And eventually I became not only sufficient, but I wanted to be the best. So I literally every day incrementally got better at it. But why? I call that the canvas mentality, okay? The canvas mentality for me is that person that's willing to go the extra mile. It's the person that's willing to jump into something, really own it, own their results, and do anything they can to get better. So those are the types of people that we're looking for, right? Those people in the past that I have employed to do canvassing, to do events, to do retail promotion, college athletic programs. Awesome for these promoters. They have a competitive drive and they are coachable for the most part, right? I've seen some players that weren't the most coachable, but they're really talented. But for the most part, they have competitive drive and they have coachability. Now, we are looking for these traits, right? We're looking for these traits. It's not necessarily we're going into every single college campus and we're just hiring athletes. It's not possible, right? But in the interview process, you can actually look for these traits. I have people doing disc analysis. I have people doing personality tests and profiles so that they can find people who are competitive and they're coachable. So those are going to be two of the biggest things when we're talking about building a team of absolute killers that are going to produce leads and appointments for you. I also, you know, maybe this is me being a little bit partial, but I also look for restaurant and retail veterans. So restaurant and retail veterans. So that person that's serving you at Subway, that person that's serving you at the retail store at the cash register, I worked in both of these environments. So maybe that's just, you know, it's coming out there because I in the past have had success and I worked in both of these different things. But going back to building teams of over 200 plus individuals, a lot of them came from these environments. And while you're out and about, you can ask those people, you know, if they're currently excited about what they're doing, and always be recruiting these types of individuals. If you get some good customer service, if you get really good customer service, then you should always be recruiting. Have cards on hand, hand out cards when you're at these places, when you're at these restaurants where an entry-level role could spin into a canvas or promoter role where they could make $35, $40, $50, $60 an hour. They're not making it where they currently are at. So if you can really sell that individual on the opportunity, you can get some great promoters out of that environment. Also, community organizations. These are natural connectors right here. So different organizations, there's groups out there. There's school groups that you can look for as well. There's a lot of people in the community, in churches. It's the youth there. It's youth pastors at the church. It's whenever you're out in these community events, You're going to be able to take a look and hopefully find some people that can staff your events and your retail. But the biggest thing for the program is going to be internal referrals from top performers. Once you have a team of killers in your Canvas team and your events team and your retail team, your best source of employees is going to be internal referrals. Now, I meet with companies all the time that don't have any incentives built out for their teams for referrals. You got to have incentives built out for referrals from an ongoing basis. You got to incentivize your current promoters, your current employees to really produce, some of their friends, like bring them on board. I actually produced, at one point I went on to college campuses. And so I went to local college campuses, this when I was much younger. And so I wasn't so out of place, right? Pushing 40 might be that weird old dude on campus. But I brought along, at the time I was about 30 years of age, I brought along some of my college-age promoters, and I gave them each some applications. I handed out applications myself, but what we did was we handed out applications on the campus, and I would give and incentivize the people that came with me. I would incentivize them like they were referring people to the team if they came out with me and they were able to land anybody while we were on the college campus. It only took a couple people coming on board through those efforts, because once I got them on board, they started making money. Some of these guys were making $50, $60 an hour, and we're going back to 2010. So $50 an hour, $60 an hour as a college student was kind of crazy. So these people were incentivized to bring on individuals. Some of these people would refer 4, 5, 6 people, and that's really when the team started to snowball and really get this culture of just accountability, and we were able to have a lead generation machine. Really was just based on referrals, because you knew that that person that you already had in your team was successful, and they were really incentivized for these people to do well as well. So you're hitting those 50% leads to hours, those 100% leads to hours type teams, and you're doing it with this ferocity that allows this snowball effect. It just keeps building up over time. And then you could start relying less on aggregators, you can start relying less, but it's really about people. The most difficult portion of this is going to be the people that you bring onto the team. Once you've built a lead generation machine that's self-sustaining, you've got a stable of really awesome people working with you to generate leads and generate appointments and opportunities, it's really about retention at that point. And that's going to boil down to compensation, right? Let's be real. If they're making good money, they're probably going to stay. But it's also going to be culture as well. And mostly when we're talking culture, we're talking about rewarding wins. We're talking about, again, compensation and culture kind of go hand in hand. But first impressions do determine retention, right? So you have to have this thing mapped out. Now again, you have to show them the way, you have to go the way, and you have to show them how exactly they're going to be successful with you for them to kind of stick around to realize their potential. Because if you're hiring somebody who has no experience in Canvas, just like I said before, I was not successful at this. I was not successful when I first started doing it. It took me a while to kind of ramp up into those really elite tiers of production. And it can take some of the best canvassers I've even had the pleasure of working with, took a long time to kind of ramp up. It was like 30 days. Now, granted, don't get me wrong, most people will show you that they're capable of doing this within 2, 3, 4 weeks. But some of the best canvassers I've ever encountered took about 3 to 4 weeks to ramp up to do this. So you have to show them short-term wins. You have to build their confidence through onboarding and just regimented training. Because if they're not seeing the results right away, you have to give them one of two things. One, if they see results right away, it's going to make your job a lot easier. 2, if they're not seeing results, you're going to have to show them the way to get to results as quickly as they possibly can so they can start making really good money. So that's the other thing that we're going to be talking a little bit about, is that retention through really good onboarding and really good training. You got to give them resources. And we here at Grosso are all about training resources. We're all about training marketers, training sales reps, and recruiting, hiring, and retention. but mostly training resources. So we have all those resources for you so you don't have to guess. We have it broken down into an itinerary for onboarding so you can talk about, what you're doing the first day, second day, third day, what your toll gates are in training, and when they're going to be expected to really produce. And those expectations will kick in right around that third, fourth week where they're going to be producing those opportunities. But you have to show them the way to get there, and we can help you with that. So the other things that I love to put in place on these teams to keep these people around is gamification. Gamification for me is just more of like a point scoring system. Let's, for example, you can put a point scoring system into place to really drive performance, and you score specific points and multipliers for producing a certain amount of leads or producing first blood type leads. I always had first blood competitions, so we'd have the bonuses for the person on my team that would get out there the fastest and produce a lead. It might even just be like $50 to the person who produces the first lead. Now you have an entire group of 20 people out there all trying to get on the doors as fast as they possibly can to get that first lead, and all it took you was $50, right? So it's gamification, but it's all about recognition as well. So what we have is monthly incentives, weekly incentives, promoter of the month, different things like that. But it's public celebration of wins. I'd actually be calling people up into the front of our meetings and be like, hey, Johnny, come on up here. Johnny had 6 appointments generated yesterday. Let's give Johnny a round of applause. And I actually hand him some incentives right in front of people. I got Johnny a $50 gift card for those 6 appointments yesterday. Let's all give him a round of applause. So it's about that public recognition. Also getting on social media, we had group threads that you could throw people up, like promoter of the week and promoter of the month and different things like that would allow you to recognize everyone on your team in these different formats. And then it's just about mission connection. So we have to create a culture. Some of the most professional organizations out there created a culture that was a mission. They connected on a mission. So is their mission, some like cult-like. I hear people saying out there like power home remodeling and different things like that in their face-to-face marketing. It's like a cult, right? But really what they're referring to is that culture that they built. They're all striving to move forward with that mission. As a small organization, you guys can leverage that. It's family, okay? Not a cult. We're creating a family and people that are all pulling in the same direction for the mission, and that mission is to provide the best home improvement sources in our local community for our customers, and we're going to do that at the largest scale possible efficiently, and you're a huge part of that, right? So we're delivering that message to our promoters throughout their employment, and that's realistically going to be the biggest thing as it pertains to building a really, really successful face-to-face marketing program. It's all about the people. You build the people and then the people build your business. You build the people and they build your face-to-face marketing program. So technology that multiplies field effectiveness, that's the next thing that we're going to talk about. Technology can be your friend. Like I hear so many people out there imploring technologies and they don't use it. It gets kicked to the curb and they don't really get their use out of it. And it's just a waste of money. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of effort. Now, what I can tell you is that definitely pertains to the face-to-face marketing programs. Some of these things are a waste of money, okay? But what we're gonna need to do is kind of sift through that. And what's really nice about it is when you work with Grosso University, when you work with me, I've had the chance to kind of vet these programs. I've used a lot of them. I've used a ton of these things and I can tell you what's effective. And certain tools are only going to be pertinent, are only going to be really relative to companies that are at certain levels. So I can assess your current situation and give you an honest feedback that maybe it's not the right time to use this software, but maybe it is. But mobile CRMs and apps, out in the field, you're going to need a door knocking app. Okay, pen and paper. Accountability, metrics, all of these things that we just talked about at the beginning of the presentation, at the beginning of this video, you're not going to be able to look at those types of things. You're going to be sending people out in the field blind, and when they come back with 0 leads, you're not going to have any feedback for them, okay? So you need to track all the data, but data is only as good, so it's garbage in, garbage out. So data is only as good as what we're feeding into the system. So you have to create this culture of accountability with your CRMs and your platforms as well. You have to map out what good data looks like. You have to map out what a good lead is. You have to map out what you're looking for from a, just a data standpoint. Like, what is a good appointment? What's a good lead? Set that thing within 72 hours. That's a good lead. Get 2 phone numbers. That's a good lead. Get as much information on that prospect as you possibly can that's correct, true, and accurate, and have some field application to usher that data right into your CRM. So field teams are capturing this info or this contact info, photos, notes, and steps instantly before they even leave the driveway. This can actually make us more effective in the long run if you can kind of notice some different things and you can start collecting data, first-party data, on people who need the products, even if they don't go forward with your promoter at the door at that particular time. So geo-mapping tools, route optimization, increases daily door counts by 20 to 30%, it's been found. So why wouldn't we, in the day and age of AI, as small companies, utilize big tools so it can gain efficiency, we can gain that insight into mapping our particular strategy for neighborhoods. We can pull whether or not they're renters, so we can save a little bit of time that way. But it's all about efficiency. So geo-mapping tools, QR codes for follow-up, or just automated follow-up in general, right? So you can bridge offline to online seamlessly. Event attendees scan codes for instant access to digital brochures, video testimonials, scheduling links, and exclusive offers. We have so much rain on imploring things that are going to make the onboarding process for an appointment so much easier. And you're going to get those people at the booth that are just looking for a brochure. Well, you have a QR code to digital brochures that then you can have them sign up, fill out a form to get those brochures so that we can retarget them and remarket them over time, so we can get to what some people are saying is 17 touch points to convert a customer. So if we can get their information and we're able to remarket that customer and get to our requisite 17 touch points and eventually convert them, that's what a lot of people are doing right now as well. So again, we already talked about AI cost calculators. Calculate their cost. Give them a ballpark, price condition. A lot of consumers are looking for the data, the information. They're looking to feel comfortable. But you can provide on-the-spot ballpark estimates using tablets. They just input their projects. You got people, programs out there like Roofle and different things like that. So they can see some price ranges. They can talk about finance options and possibly using your QR to follow up with some of that information as well. But transparency builds trust with customers, and that's becoming so evident. It's becoming more and more profound as we go along. People are just looking to have simplicity. People are just looking to really connect with a company that they trust because they've been down this road before. They might have had a home improvement company that didn't do good work, wasn't transparent, came in, there's the list of things go on and on and on. But we're just trying to separate ourselves in our face-to-face marketing so that we can really separate ourselves and create that lead generation engine. Now, we were talking a little bit about statistics. Now, we'll talk a little bit about stat sheets. We're not going to beat this point up, but it's really about getting those metrics down on paper, getting those metrics in a digital form, not on paper, but in a digital form so that we can define our metrics, right? So each person in our organization, from a face-to-face marketing perspective, has to have 5 to 7 numbers that truly drive your business. And they need to know whether or not they've hit their benchmarks, hit their goals, and to drive that program and to drive the business. So what I like to do is daily tracking for entry-level employees or promoters. They have to have daily stat sheets. Now, weekly analysis we're going to review trends, identify obstacles, and celebrate improvements. So that's going to be our leadership type meetings that we're going to take a look at the holistic program when it talks about face-to-face marketing. But again, we're also at each individual stage, whether it's daily, weekly, or monthly, we're going to have public recognition. But you're going to want to do that from a leaderboard standpoint. I like to have instant access to those wins. have leaderboards set up. You can do these things in like a data box, or you can do these in group forums like GroupMe or WhatsApp or specific chats where you can just promote a video. 30-second video of your manager coming onto a group thread that says, hey, I'd like to recognize these 3 people from yesterday. Congratulations, we're sending out a $20 gas card each. I really appreciate your efforts and you guys have been wonderful. And what's stopping you from doing that tomorrow? A 30-second video from the owner of the company saying, hey, Johnny, you're the promoter of the week. 20 qualified appointments in 1 week. Johnny, you're the man. I'm going to send you and your wife out for $100. I'm going to give you a $100 gift card for dinner this Friday night, or whenever you want to use that thing. Like, these things don't have to be set in stone. You can do these types of things in recognition in whatever way you see fit, but it can really breed that culture of accountability and really breed that culture, that family atmosphere that we're talking about. So we're going to talk a little bit about canvasser metrics, event staff metrics, and director dashboard type metrics. Now, again, it's a funnel. Now we're taking 5 to 7 numbers or metrics here. And the first one is doors knocked per hour. The first hurdle is get the volume in. This is a volume game in face-to-face marketing. It's all about how many people you talk to or interact with, right? So start knocking the doors and get to as many as you possibly can. So 100 to 120 doors is definitely well within reach for your good canvassers. So 100 to 120 doors, that's what we're going to be shooting for. Sets and sets per hour. So out of those 120 doors, if you're contacting 20% of the people that you knock, and again, this can be very different. During prime time hours between 4 and 8 p.m., you're obviously going to be contacting the majority of the homeowners. And earlier in the day, maybe 10 to 2 or 3 or 4, you're not going to be contacting many of those people until they get home from work or they bring the kids home from school, right? So sets per hour is going to be relative to how many hours you're on the doors. It's going to take into consideration that, yes, you're not going to be talking to many people during the day unless we're targeting demographics like older neighborhoods and older folks. Maybe if we have a bathroom product and our demographic skews a little bit older, then we can target those types of neighborhoods. But in the grand scheme of things, on the average, you're going to be contacting more people in the afternoon, but it will be mapped out to where it's taking that into consideration. So sets and sets per hour, anywhere from that half a set per hour to the 1 set per hour that we're shooting for. Then we're going to look at leads issued and issue rate. So these are things that I used to put on a daily board on the wall in my office and in my canvas room. Total demos, and total demos is just how many demos that they've influenced on a monthly basis. And I do that month to date because that's what they were mostly paid for when we were running these programs, is demos. So I wanted them to know exactly where they stood on the monthly because they could actually calculate their pay right from that. And then we had lead quality scores, okay? So this is a new thing relatively, but it takes into consideration how far out that appointment's set, 72 hours. It takes into consideration a couple phone numbers, whether it verified, whether it confirmed, and it gives you lead quality scores. And that's an individual metric that's relative to their actual quality of lead that they're setting based on all of these things. You get a score anywhere from 1 to 100 on these leads, and you score that relative. So they could be at a 70, 80, or 90, depending on how quality the appointments are that they're setting. Same thing here for event staff metrics. Leads and sets generated per hour, set gap. Set gap's a new one. That's the 72-hour thing that we were talking about. But that gives a concrete number, an aggregate number for the appointments that you're setting. So a good set gap might be anything below 5. So if we're shooting for 72 hours on the majority of the appointments that we have, that's 3 days. So if you have a promoter that's hitting under 5 for their average set gap, they're setting the majority of their appointments in that 1 to 3 day range. They may have some in the 4 to 5 day range, kind of smattering there. And then they're going to have very few that are 7, 8, 9 days out, right? So you're going to look at that set gap for the quality of the appointments to try to bring those things tighter, because event metrics dictate that you're going to want to run the majority. Say you run in a weekend event, you're going to want to run the majority of those appointments, some of them same day. I love setting same day appointments at events. You're there on a Saturday morning, we get there on a Saturday afternoon. But if that's not possible, you're going to want to set the majority of those appointments from Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and at the worst Friday, okay? And at the very, very worst Saturday, so within 1 week at the very worst, but the majority of your appointments want to be very tight on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So again, we're going to talk about leads issued and issue rate, total demos so they know where they stand in terms of pay, and then again, that lead quality score. Now, from a director dashboard, this is more holistic metrics on your entire team. I want them cognizant of the program itself, the cost per lead, team aggregate performance, so how many leads per hour our entire team has, how much labor we've had, how many labor hours do we have to how many leads we've set. Schedule fill rate is another really great one. Schedule share percentage. So schedule fill rate is just going to be the amount of, say you're a relatively small company, you have 3 sales reps, each individual rep can run 3 appointments on a normal day. That's 9 schedule openings. So that's 9 schedule openings. A schedule fill rate of 66% would dictate that we had 6 of those filled, right? Pretty easy math. So the schedule fill rate, but then you also take that into consideration relative to a schedule share rate. Schedule share rate would be that out of those 6 filled appointment slots, how much of those were related to your event program, your Canvas program. Say you had 2 event appointments, you had 4 event appointments. You're looking at either 33% or 66% of that schedule fill rate or that schedule share percentage. I was always shooting from my event, Canvas, and retail program. Now, we weren't talking about 9 appointment slots. There were some days where we had 40 or 50 openings, and we were shooting for 25% of those. I was shooting for right around a dozen of those appointments to be from face-to-face marketing, right? So that would be relative to what you have going on at the time, the projections you have out of your events, or the head count that you have from a Canvas perspective. That's going to be different for everybody. Revenue share percentage is something that I also looked at. When I was doing the revenue share percentage for a lot of the companies that I was working for, I always pushed for 35%. That might be a little bit selfish because the more revenue we generated, the more money I made, right? But at the end of the day, a healthy marketing mix, you're going to be doing anywhere from 25 to 30% of your revenue out of these retail event and Canvas opportunities. So that's what we shot for. But that's going to be different for you as well based on the actual opportunities that you have. The last thing that we were looking at was ROI by channel or by event. So each individual event I break down into its own marketing source because I wanted to see that we were, one event could drown out the other one. In fact, you could be really successful at another event and then have 3 of them that were less than successful, and maybe that one event would carry those other 3 opportunities. So if you're not looking at it on a micro level, you're not going to notice that you only produced 1 net generated sale out of each of these 3 events and you produced 8 over on another one. It's going to all blend together unless you reach into that and take a look at each individual event on its own. So you're taking a look at those events on their own, and hey, those 3 events, maybe 1 generated net sale out of that event was a really good return on investment because you only spent $100 on a tabling. So you spent $100 on a tabling, you had 1 person there and got 1 sale. That could be fantastic. Whereas this other one where you generated 8 appointments maybe you had a $10,000 entry fee and you were still not ROI positive, right? It's going to be relative to the cost you had for getting into the event and the amount of staffing that you needed to go into the event. That's why we do it by the channel or the event, because it's relative to how much it cost. We want to know how much it costs to the relative revenue that we generated, and then we can really know how we're doing as a program, right? Last thing I'll say or note is we're really looking for a culture shift, okay? Metrics equal empowerment. You see at failed organizations or failed face-to-face programs, and the culture is not good enough to instill this kind of accountability. people get really offended or they get really defensive when you instill metrics and accountability, because you didn't give them the ability to get to that level of production or that level of performance. So you need to have a culture shift. And I always think metrics are about empowerment. They're about reaching your expectations and reaching your full potential. It's not punishment, it's empowerment. When everyone sees their numbers, improvement becomes a personal challenge rather than a management pressure. Transparency builds trust and a healthy competition that drives collective growth. This is about the collective, it's about growth, it's about building your team. So when you institute all of these metrics here, we have individual metrics, we have individual metrics here for canvassers, individual metrics for event staff, and team metrics. I always like to build transparency on literally all of these things. Every individual promoter knows how they're doing, they know how the team's doing, they know how the company's doing. So I build in company metrics and say where we're at relative to our entire sales goal as an organization. Because these metrics mean something when you're all pulling in the same direction and you're shooting for a really lofty goal. Say you have a $2 million sales goal for the month. These people, the event staff and the canvassers, should know where you stand relative to that. If you have a canvas team that you're going to be out there producing on a $2 million goal, $500,000 in revenue because you have 8 canvassers on your team, you want those canvassers know, like, hey, you guys are 25% of the total goal that we have for this organization. That's why we're out here forcing one lead, one generated appointment per hour. You guys are crushing it. You guys are the shit. You guys are really getting after it. So if we hit this, you put a BHAG out there, big, hairy, audacious goal. If we're all pulling in the same direction, we hit that $2 million sales goal, you guys hit your $500,000 goal, we're gonna take you to an amusement park. We're gonna take you out to dinner. We're gonna take you to steak dinner. We're gonna take you here to a ball game. All of those things are going to make your program more successful. You wanna create a lead generation machine, and it's all about culture, it's all about accountability, it's all about metrics. So let's talk a little bit about that, and then we'll wrap it up here, okay? Year-round growth. I always had quarterly themes for my teams as well. We had Canvas Blitz challenges. So we're launching intensive door knocking competitions year-round in Q1 because, you have to take a look at where your ebb and flow of your business is. If you have what's called home show season in Q1, you might not have Canvas Blitz challenges in Q1. You might just have home show type challenges and promoters of the month and different things like that. But we set aggressive targets in these months as well, because home shows will tick up in a lot of markets in Q1. But if you don't have that going on, maybe you're in a market where you only have 2 home shows in Q1, and then from April and May, you have a really dense population of home shows that kind of carry you a little bit. This might change a little bit, but we have the ebb and flow of our business, and some people have a drop-off in November and December and January. I'm in the Midwest. I'm in Wisconsin. I've been out in negative 20-degree weather where it takes additional incentives to build a team in December and January and February when it's negative 20 outside. You need to take that into consideration and really start pumping the motivation, but never lay off the gas in terms of expectations and accountability, and that's how you generate that accountability and that year-round lead generation and performance. So now we also talk about an event innovation sprint, right? It's and these are all just kind of ideas for really pushing the face-to-face program. But we like to test bold, creative event concepts, give teams license to experiment with community engagement strategies, track results, scale winners, learn from experiments, and give incentives to suggest events. I have a bounty on events for my team. Each person on my team, whether it's a sanctioned event or one we're creating ourselves, can bring events to my attention. Now, when I was first firing up an event program, we had event programs that we'd try anything once, right? But we also had the ability to create events. There were certain, I actually went to a zoo one time and produced different events. One was called Mad City Monkey Madness, okay? So where we went to the zoo, we promoted the monkeys, we gave plushies of monkeys out to all the kids that came in, interacted with the homeowners, we had giveaways, we had monkey masks and ears that we could wear. So there's a lot of different things that you can do, and then you can get your micro content for sharing on social media when you're walking around doing these really engaging events. And that was all concocted by just a think tank when we were at the office, and we're thinking about ways that we could get out in front of the community and really engage with people. Giving a bounty on that, I'd give them a $200, $300 for bringing me an event that we actually ran. And then I'd give them additional incentives if we were successful, if we produced at that event. Because these people, you bring it to my attention, I'll let you work there 100% of the time. You can staff the event, you can produce the business, produce your leads, produce your revenue, but I'm also going to give you a bonus if we're successful on that event if you brought it to my attention. Now, recruiting and retention, Q3, we deep dive into team building as summer heats up, right? Focus on bringing in fresh talent, improving onboarding, and strengthening team culture for retention through Q4 and Q1 push and home shows. I see people recruiting very late in the year, but as I can say, we have ebb and flow to our business. I see people losing entire Canvas teams when it comes to November and December, and then they're really struggling to staff their home shows in January, February, and March. So you want to take that into consideration about recruiting and retention. Let's start having those cultural events right towards the end of the summer, taking people to ball games, really acknowledging people, and driving retention. Driving your recruiting, driving your retention, because it's a lot easier to retain top talent than it is to find it. So what you need to do is drive that so you don't lose them right before the busiest time of your year. That might be January, February, and March. So we're really, really laser focused on retention as we go through Q3. And then every single year we had Champion of Champions. So we were giving away incentives, we were giving away Promoters of the Year. I ran programs where we gave $10,000 bonuses at the end of the year. If you hit a certain lead tier, if you hit a certain appointment tier, we were given $10,000 bonuses at the end of the year. It hurts to write those checks, I know. But you gotta be reminded that these are people that were producing anywhere from 250 to 300 demos on the year, okay? These are people that are the elite of the elite. They're averaging anywhere from 25 to 30 demos produced per month. Could you imagine a person that you hire tomorrow and every single day they produce a qualified demo? Some of you guys out there that I meet with are paying anywhere from $400 to $500 to $600, $700, $800 per demo, right? So if you have somebody who can consistently bring you a demo at $200 or $300, and that person is going to be incentivized to stay on your team by additional bonuses and different things like that, those things paid for themselves in spades. Some of those promoters that we gave those bonuses to, I know have been in this industry for over 15 years at the same company. So you gotta see what you're spending on recruiting and hiring, and if you had a lead source that was like a steam locomotive, it's just boiling down the track, and you'd probably do everything that you could to keep those people on board, to keep that thing doing its thing and generating those leads. Right? That means you got to invest in your people. All right? So those quarterly themes are really, really great to inspire people. So at the end here, we just want to tell you that numbers don't lie, but they do inspire. Okay? So numbers will inspire your team if you do this thing right. So face-to-face is all about numbers, accountability, and metrics. It takes innovation. It takes the right culture, it takes the right fit, but at the end of the day, it takes accountability without bearing on the aggressive. So you can retain people and you can really push together a culture and a team that produces leads for you. So the 30-day action plan for a lot of clients that I talk to is gonna be a few different things. I know people have stat sheets right now. I know that they're already doing events, and I know that you're utilizing some form of technology, but what I implore them to do is identify one metric you'll start tracking daily. You probably heard something in here where you're like, okay, like a quality score or a set gap, those types of things that could really drive your team forward. I ask people to adopt those metrics and implement at least one of those within the next 30 days to really drive their team forward. Creative event strategy. Choose one unconventional event and commit to it. Do it. Just get out there and do your event. You know, you don't know if you don't try. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So get out there and do an event that puts you out of your comfort zone. One of these things, like a barbecue event, an open house, a coffee cart, or a showroom type event. If you got a showroom, leverage it. Get your money out of that thing. So technology adoption. Now, this doesn't mean you even have to go out and get new technology. There's probably one you have right now that you're not using whatsoever. Get out there, use it, maximize your use of the technology so that you can get that efficiency lift. Because at one point, you probably wanted that technology to do something, right? So get it to start doing what you adopted it to do. That's one. Or two, if you are in a position where you're relatively new to this space or face-to-face marketing, take a look at some different technologies that you could employ to make it make sense from an accountability standpoint or your ability to manage that, because it's all about management and efficiency when it comes down to technology. If it isn't checking one of those two boxes, it's probably not right for you at that moment, right? Remember, if we reverse back to the beginning of the video, I told you that's not right, and we can actually advise you on all of these things. I would love to meet with you guys and talk about stat sheet improvements, creative event strategies, and technology adoption. All of these things I've become an expert on. I'm the best in the industry at taking a look at different marketing mixes as a holistic view, and that includes face-to-face marketing. I'm just talking about face-to-face marketing here today because I've literally been approached by dozens of companies that are looking to start it or make it more effective. And that means face-to-face marketing. So we're taking a look at this, and that's why we did this video for you for free training so that you could take a look at really dialing in your face-to-face efforts or starting those off, kicking those off to compete with all those other companies in your local area so that you can really separate yourself and get a lead generation machine rolling. And that's our expertise, so that's why we made the video here today. So I hope you took something away from that video. Obviously we're talking about face-to-face marketing, but this applies to all of your marketing efforts. Here at Grosso University, we are marketing experts. We're sales training experts. So we'd love to help your company dial in all of these things. So from a marketing perspective, we have different resources, including this Canvas guide right here that you can ask us about. What it's gonna do is break down all of the things you need to know from a canvassing perspective. You got scripting in there, you got itineraries, you got expectations, benchmarks, different goal setting things that you can do with your team. But it's gonna give you every resource that you need to run an effective face-to-face marketing program. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about maximizing face-to-face and lead generation, and you only do that through accountability and through metrics and through the ability to really show people how to be successful. We've already gone through the cost prohibitive trial and error to make a program successful, so use this as a resource. Reach out to us. We'll be able to help you anything face-to-face marketing, anything omni-channel marketing, anything digital advertising, anything sales training related. We have our masterclass that starts on every second Monday of the month. And I always say that the best closing percentages is the best marketing strategy. So if you can increase your closing percentages, it just makes your marketing that much more effective. So we can handle all of those things. We can handle your sales training, your marketing training, your recruiting, your hiring, retention, because at the end of the day, it's all about the people that you bring in the door. And we have a full service recruiting department as well called GU Talent Solutions that can get you the right people in the right spots that we can train and make sure that you don't have that cost prohibitive trial and error that we had when we started doing this. That's our mission. That's what we'd love to do for you. So reach out and we can get you hooked up with those resources. And as always, at Grosso University, yes, you are a closer.